everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here to film a recent reads video. And this is the first one I filmed in February, so this is going to cover books that I finished at the end of the month of January, and also books that I finished here in the first little bit of February. So let's just get to it. I have a bunch of books to talk about, most of which are nonfiction. So the first one is a book that I read on my Kindle. This is Boys and Oil, Growing Up Gay in a Fractured Land by Taylor Brorby. And I buddy read this with Sean from Sean the Book Maniac. And so this is a memoir. Brorby grew up in North Dakota. He grew up in a very small community, which primarily depended on resource extraction, natural resource extraction, particularly in the petroleum industry. And so this book really details his growing up and what that community was like. And a lot of it is his story of, coming out and what it was like to be gay in this particular landscape, in this particular community. And those things, I think that part was particularly strong. What was less strong was the weaving together of his sort of work with environmental justice and discussion of the impacts of natural resource extraction on North Dakota and sort of the broader community. I think that I was hoping for more on that aspect of the story, and I didn't receive it. So that was a little bit disappointing for me. I think this is a really good memoir of a young man's trying to come to grips with his own identity. And so if that is your primary interest in this book, I think you would be satisfied with it. But if you're really looking for the bringing together of two topics here, I think that that is less well done. So, but as always, enjoyed the buddy read with Sean. And that's the only one on the Kindle for this particular time period. So I'm going to set that down. And then the rest of these I have here in physical copies. So the first one is this book, Breathless, The Scientific Race to Defeat a Deadly Virus by David Quammen. I buddy read this with Doris from Aldi Books. And this is Quammen's description of basically how we came to know about the COVID-19 virus and the race to create vaccines to combat the impacts of that virus. And so this really is a follow-up to his book Spillover, which I read a couple of months ago, because it really talks about the work that was done prior to our interactions with COVID-19 and with that virus, with that coronavirus, and the work that had been done previously to that with scientists working on infectious disease and scientists working on how zoonoses happen, so diseases that cross over from the animal population to the human population, what we know about genetic mapping and how we know about how we can basically describe the genetic thumbprint of a virus and how that knowledge happened to be in place in time for us to really go to work in developing vaccines and other treatments for this virus. Really, really interesting, really fast paced. It is highly about the science, but I think that Quammen does an excellent job of bringing the average reader along. He is very good at sort of laying out step by step how certain theories came to be about where the virus came from and how he debunks those myths. So for example, he talks about, the idea that the COVID-19 virus was engineered in a lab and released on purpose, or engineered in a lab and released by mistake, or was it, basically came from some animal that was in a live market being sold for food and then crossed over into the human population. And he goes through each one of those theories and step by step explains what we know and what we don't know, and how science works, and how science is an iterative process. Science is not ever static. Science is always changing, and the work that scientists are doing to understand the world, it just builds on itself all the time. And so it inevitably is going to change. What we know about any particular theory is going to change over time, and we just have to accept that that is how science works. And so anybody that thinks that, today, a paper gets published and a scientist has discovered X thing about science, that work is going to get tested, it's going to get built upon, new information is going to be acquired, and it's going to change how we look at that particular bit of information. And David Quammen does an excellent job of really talking about that and hopefully expanding our understanding of how science works, and particularly science research into virus and infectious disease. So fantastic book. Highly recommend. You can see from my tabs, I was just like so much really excellent information in here. I love this book. I then finished Billy Summers by Stephen King. This is not King's latest piece of fiction, but it is the next one that I had to read, as I've been reading his work since I was a kid, and so I just now at this point keep up in chronological order as he publishes them, always maintaining one unread book on my TBR for the inevitable day when Stephen King is no longer with us. So Billy Summers is an interesting King book in that it is not horror. It is basically, I would say it's a slow-paced thriller, if that is such a thing. So we're following the titular character, Billy Summers, who is an assassin for hire. He is ex-military. He was a sharpshooter in the military, very good at what he does, and Billy Summers will only take jobs where he kills bad people. So he has justified this job, this basically career, to himself by the fact that he will only agree to take jobs where he's killing people who are bad, morally bad, ethically bad. And by bad, I mean like really bad people that kill other people or are causing harm to others in a really bad way. So he gets called by one of his contacts and agrees to take on this job. And it's in a small Midwestern city. And basically he's going to be assassinating a guy who's a bad dude. But he has to embed himself in this community. And so it's all about Summers like embedding himself in this community and what that entails, how he does this kind of a job, the different guises that he has to wear. And I would say I was really enjoying the first half of this book. And there is a twist in sort of the middle. And a new character is introduced. And after that character is introduced, the book kind of, I mean, it's still good. I still had a good time reading this. I listened to some of it on audiobook, and then I read some of it. So it's, I think that the audiobook actually is probably not as good as reading it physically. I didn't really love the narrator's voice, but it was good, and it's entertaining, but it gets really unbelievable. Like, I really had a hard time at a certain point suspending my disbelief, because the things that happen in this book, I'm like, I don't know. It just was really crazy. And also, Billy Summers is one of those characters who, like, tons of shit happens to him, and he just, you know, nothing sort of stops him, kind of thing. And then that becomes, it's just kind of like reading a blockbuster thriller movie, action movie, you know, like one of these, I don't watch those kind of movies, so I can't come up with any characters' names off the top of my head, but the ones, you know, that never seem to die, no matter what happens to them, you know, like Mission Impossible kind of stuff. But yeah, it's entertaining. I think the ending redeemed it a lot for me, because the ending is very good, and I think sort of makes up for a lot of the stuff that I had problems with in the beginning. So I still like this. I don't think it's Stephen King's best work, but I am glad that I read it. The next work that I finished was The Fisherman and the Dragon by Kirk Wallace Johnson. The subtitle is Fear, Greed, and a Fight for Justice on the Gulf Coast. This is another buddy read with Doris from Aldi Books. We were like leaning heavily into the science nonfiction over the last few weeks. And this is a book by the author, Kirk Wallace Johnson, who wrote The Feather Thief, which I read and enjoyed some time ago. So this book is about a time period after the Vietnam War where refugees from Vietnam were arriving in America and settling in different places. And this is about a group that settled on the Gulf Coast in Texas, and tried to become shrimp fishermen. And the reaction of the white community to these immigrants who have come in and are, coming into this industry, this fishing industry, on top of the pressures of this group that have come in and have started to join the fishing community, are pollution issues due to petrochemical industry sort of just dumping everything into the bay, and oil spills happening, and just industrial chemical production and what that does to the environment. So tensions are rising in the community. It's a poor community. Everybody's struggling. It's the 70s. Like, times are tough. This immigrant community comes in, and the whites, of course, the white community, fishing community, blames all of their ills and their problems on this refugee community. And they somehow bring in the KKK into all this. And the KKK comes in and starts doing what they do to the Vietnamese population. And it's crazy and horrible. And Wallace Johnson does this fabulous job of, like, very much telling us the story of what happened, but not leaning his thumb on the scale. Like, he's not telling this story so that we'll hate one side or the other, or we'll dislike one side or the other. He's just telling you the story of what happened. And there's plenty of misbehavior on both sides, actually. And then it sort of gets into sort of civil rights questions and how different organizations tried to help the Vietnamese sort of be able to keep fishing. I really enjoyed all of that. The history of this time period, which I didn't know anything about, so well detailed. I think Johnson does a great job of telling the story and just sort of laying it all out there and letting you be the judge of these individuals and what they've done and didn't do. So yeah, highly recommend this one as well. The only thing I wish is that there had been more about the petrochemical side of this thing. I mean, we get a lot of information about the pollution that these companies are causing and the horrible environmental justice problems that this, creates, but really not any sort of resolution to that side of the problem. And I think I was a little bit frustrated with that. So that kept it from being maybe like a 5-star read for me, but it's still a very strong read, and I very much enjoyed my time with this book. Although it did piss me off incredibly. I mean, I don't want you to go away thinking I was like happy the whole time I was reading that, because I very much was not. Another fiction book that I finished is one that's been all over the place on BookTube, and this is the fantasy novel Babel by RF Kuang. And this is dark academia about an alternate history in which a particular aspect of Oxford University is dedicated to people who use translation to create magic. And in this alternate history, takes place in the middle part of the 1800s. Britain is, sort of doing its whole empire thing all around the world, and they're on top because they have captured the most silver, and they use that silver along with these translation folks to create magic that allows them to have, the most powerful navy and the best financial situations, and to basically take advantage of everything that's happening with the Industrial Revolution to put themselves on top. And the way they do that, of course, is by going to other countries and taking their silver and bringing it back to England. Not only their silver, but all of their resources. And so it's a look at colonialism, it's a look at free trade capitalism and the ills of both of those systems, and how that impacts this group of people who are acting as translators. So our main character is Robin Swift, who is an orphan from China. Actually, I shouldn't say he's an orphan. We think at the beginning that he's an orphan. His whole family has just died when this mysterious British professor shows up and sort of takes him away, heals him using silver from the illnesses that he's suffering, and takes him away on a ship to England, where he is brought up as a ward of this professor until he is of age to go to Babel, which is the school in Oxford where they teach young people to be translators and to use silver to create magic and to run the empire, basically. And so we follow Robin Swift and the friends that he makes when he goes to school and their adventures, basically. So the premise is great of this story. I enjoyed the themes of the book, the discussion of the evils of colonialism and capitalism. I am here for, but I would say that I was disappointed in this book because the pacing is not good. The pacing is bad in this book. The plot, I mean, the first half of the book is like nothing happens. Like nothing happens. And not even really true character development. I mean, the characters don't really change. You could read 100 pages and like nothing has really happened. And it's not to say that I didn't enjoy my time spent in this novel. I did. I found it in a book that was, you know, easy to read. I didn't dislike it while I was reading it. I just would read 100 pages and say to myself, nothing happened. Nothing moved forward in the story. And I did find that frustrating. And then the second half of the book, or like the last third of the book, I should say, everything happens. And so like all of the action of the book is focused on the last third of it. And even that had a bit of like something big would happen and then we would sit around and wait. And the characters don't even like have deep conversations while this waiting periods are happening. So I was really frustrated with the pacing. I don't think that the plot was done in a way that makes this a really good book. And also I would say that there were several, probably at least 3 of the main characters in the story did not always act in the way that the author had characterized them. And, you know, so they would do things and you'd be like, well, that does not go with how these folks were characterized from the beginning of the story. Like that action that they just took, or lack of action, just does not jibe with everything else that I've learned about these characters from the very beginning of the story. So that kind of bothered me as well. It was like, I want if you're going to have a character and you're going to describe them in a certain way and you're going to build this story around them acting in a certain way, you can't just have them acting like completely out of character and be like, oh, well, just, I guess that one time they're not going to behave in the way that they normally behave. And just as a reader, I found that very frustrating. So yeah, I won't say that, I mean, I didn't hate this book while I was reading it, but there were aspects of it that really frustrated me. And in the end, at the end of the day, I just don't think it was very well done. And which is too bad because, like I said, the premise and the themes that she's talking about in this book, I think are very good. So, too bad. And then the last book that I've completed in the last few weeks is Why the Dutch Are Different, A Journey into the Hidden Heart of the Netherlands by Ben Coates. This was a gift from Britta Bowler for me for Christmas, given to me because she knows that I will be traveling to Europe in the springtime and I will be visiting the Netherlands. And I don't know very much about the Netherlands and the history of the Netherlands. So this is sort of a mixture of history and travel writing by Ben Coates, who is a British citizen who winds up in the Netherlands because of he gets married to a woman who's from the Netherlands. And so he's lived in the Netherlands for like 5 years at the time when he writes this book. And the book is divided up into different sections where he talks about different aspects of history and culture. And I did find it interesting, but I also found it to be, I think Coates talks a little bit out of both sides of his mouth. Like on the one hand, he's a big booster of the Dutch and the Netherlands, that, you know, it's a clean country and it's the liberal progressive tendencies of the people and their government and the culture have led to a very open-minded society, which he enjoys and thinks highly of. And then he'll talk about that for a while, and then he'll just immediately launch into like episodes of extreme racial violence and hate crimes that have happened, particularly from white Dutch folks towards Muslim immigrants. And, you know, there's historical reasons for a lot of the conflicts, but like on the one hand, a few pages ago, you were just telling me like how liberal-minded and progressive and open the Dutch people are to like everyone, and that's why it's such a great country. And then you like launch into this whole explanation of like all the racist crap that goes on there, which I'm not like, I don't downgrade every country has its problems, right? When it comes to racism and prejudice and certain groups being, you know, held down in the society. Like, every country has those problems, I think. But I'm like, if you're gonna, you can't tell me that, like, it's almost a perfect country, is one of the best places in the world because of this particular aspect of the culture, and then launch into a big diatribe about this bad aspect, which then he's like, after he tells me all this, like, sort of prejudice and racism that's directed towards these particular segments of the society, he then, like, justifies it by, he's like, well, yeah, I've been living here for 5 years, and, like, the people who are rude to me on the street tend to come from this particular segment of the population, and I'm like, ew, like, no, I don't need to hear your own racist prejudice. Like, that part really bothered me. The parts where he's talking about the history of the Netherlands and, like, the incredible engineering that has happened to make the Netherlands a livable place because of the floods and all that. Super interesting. There's a whole chapter in here about the Dutch love of football and how that all developed. That was super interesting. He talks specifically about different cities in the Netherlands and their claim to fame, like each one of them, and that was interesting. It was the part about, like, whether or not the Dutch are progressive and liberal and open to everyone, or they are racist towards Muslims. Like, I don't think it's either or, right? I think there's, like, probably shades of gray, and I just found his particular attitude towards this to be icky. So I think that there's good information in here, but just go into it with your eyes open and realize that it's one guy's look at a culture that he is not 100% a part of. He's only lived there for a few years. He is British. And so he's coming at this society with an outsider's take, which is good on the one hand, but then again, maybe he has some of his own prejudices that he's bringing to the table. And so just keep that in mind when and if you ever pick this book up. So yeah, but I do feel that I learned quite a bit about the Netherlands in general, just maybe with some attitudes thrown in there that I wasn't appreciative of. So that's it. Those are the books that I've completed in the last few weeks. A real good mixture of stuff. I feel like my reading's been very strong in the recent past, and I'm hoping that that continues. I'm reading, like, so many books right now. It's ridiculous. I don't even know how many they are total, but it's a lot. And I'm loving it. I'm loving it. This is not a complaint by any means. Anyway, I hope that you're all doing well and you're finding some good books to read, and I will talk to you later.